Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sharon Bonney. I am the CEO for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today. We are all technology teachers and learners, advancing our practice through collaboration and inquiry, plus Google Classroom. And this webinar is generously sponsored by KET. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Sarah Wilkins, who has a few slides to share with you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Dr. Sarah, would you like to share your screen?
Yes, just a moment, please. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. During these unusual and unprecedented times, you should be seeing my screen by now. Can maybe someone just let me know if it's popped up for you?
Yes,
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. So in the chat bar, you will see a link to this page, so you can go back and revisit when we're finished today. We've put lots of information and resources on here for you that I think you'll want to go back and spend a little time with. So during this time, as we were saying, it can be very challenging for adult educators to figure out how best to still serve our communities and our learners through distance learning. And I know that many of you may be somewhat familiar with PBS Learning Media, but I wanted to just show it to you a little bit today, just so you can see some ways, if you are familiar with it, some ways to look at it through new eyes to see how to leverage these great resources, and if not, to introduce you to learning media. So we should be seeing the PBS Learning Media page now.
So we do not see that. Do you want to click up there? Yeah, there you go. Now we can.
Oh,
thank you.
Did it pop in now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So PBS Learning Media is an online repository of over 100,000 learning resources, many of which can be used during times like these, for Google Classroom, or sending links to your learners for videos or lessons that you'd like them to see. You'll see here a list of lessons and information divided by subject area. If you want to search for something in particular in learning media, you can click on subjects and look at any of the subject matter. You can search by grade or by standard. There are lots of ways to utilize learning media in the tools section. And you can access these when you create an account in PBS Learning Media. You'll notice at the top of the page it has my name. I've created an account to save my favorite resources, but there's a lesson builder, a quiz maker, a storyboard, and a puzzle builder. And if I click on some of my lessons, for instance, here's one on mass versus weight. You can see that I have the opportunity to assign it to a class, or I can assign through Google Classroom. So these are some great ways to share these resources and keep the learning going with your students. And Sharon, I'm going to ask you to just check me on my time here. I do sometimes get a little carried away, so please jump in. KET has a great collection of adult education resources. And from here, and again, remember the links to all of these are in the chat box at the very beginning. So we have some great work-ready resources on soft skills that so many employers ask for these days. And we also have wonderful language arts and math content contextualized to specific career sectors. So for instance, in construction, we have this great video on adding and subtracting and why it makes sense in the construction field. I know many times our learners may say, when am I ever going to have to know how to do this in real life? Well, our team traveled the country and interviewed people who work in these fields and discussed how they use these mathematic and language arts concepts in their everyday work. All of these contain background readings and discussion questions. And again, these are things that you can implement, send the links to your students, let them interact with the material. And if you're using Google Classroom or even on Facebook, send a link and start a discussion with your learners virtually to keep them engaged and to keep the education moving along.
Great. Dr. Wilkins, thank you so much for that information. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for letting us be a part of this today.
Yes, I really want to thank KET because of their generous sponsorship. We're able to have this webinar for free. And we know that this is really important right now at a time when we want to be sure to help our field out as much as possible. So just want to again say thank you to KET for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know if you all can see my slides here. I'm hoping so. I'm going to make this large. I'm going to go through this quickly because we have a wonderful presentation to share with you today. So first of all, I just want to mention to everybody that our journal is now available on Amazon Kindle. Wonderful way to be able to download and access that. You can access via articles or via the full journal. So just wanted to mention that that's a workforce edition. We have some really exciting authors have written in, many of you from the field as well who participated in this journal. Next, I wanted to mention that after this webinar, your certificate of participation will be emailed to you within 24 hours. Also, slides and resources will be available in our adult educator repository within 48 hours. So this is a question that comes up often. Yes, you will receive a certificate of participation. Also, we have targeted webinars and training that we provide for this COVID crisis and how to deal with that. And we have a number of webinars that are coming up this week as well. So I just want to encourage you all, if you haven't done so, you're welcome to go in and to register. And the way this works is it's really first come, first serve. So welcome and encourage you to get on as quickly as possible so that you can participate in the webinars because we only have 1,000 seats. And then finally today we have our webinar presenters, Jennifer Corbin and also Jillian Gerke. And I would like to read a little bit about them. So Jennifer Coburn, for nearly 2 decades, Jennifer has worked with schools, districts, and communities leading professional development and creating innovative programs and partnerships. As Director of Digital Initiatives with the City of Philadelphia's Office of Adult Education, Jennifer managed a network of public access computer centers and designed online and blended courses for adult learners. She currently consults, provides professional development for adult education programs. Jillian Gerke studied Spanish and economics at DePauw University and has an MAT in Spanish from Indiana University and the University, I'm not even sure how to pronounce this, University de Salamanca. In 2007, she moved to Philadelphia to teach high school students Spanish in the school district of Philadelphia with a project-based learning and laptop school. Jillian started working with the Garcias Foundation in her current role as the program manager for a workforce training ESL program, English for the Restaurant and Everyday Living. In addition, she mentors graduate students from the TESOL program at the University of Pennsylvania, and she teaches English and Spanish. So I'd like to welcome them both today, and we really appreciate them, and we look forward to this webinar.
Hi guys, I'm Jen. I'm going to be leading off our webinar, and then Jillian's going to come in around the second half. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Just hope that this works here. You know, we've all had our interesting moments with technology in the last few weeks. So let's see if we can get this going. Okay, great. So you should be able to see the PowerPoint. Is that correct?
Yes, and Jennifer, I should have also mentioned, I apologize, folks, please only put your questions in the Q&A and you can chat and introduce yourself in the chat box.
Yeah. And we'll direct you when it's time which one to use. Okay, great. So welcome to today's webinar. We are all technology teachers and learners advancing our practice through collaboration and inquiry. I am coming to you live from cloudy Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from my living room. I'm really excited to be with our adult ed community kind of from all over the country. I've been looking at the chat and we have people from like Arizona, Michigan, Washington, D.C., Connecticut. So it was just really exciting. I know we couldn't come together at the COABE conference in April, but it's just awesome to be able to come together this way. If we can't be in person, it's all we have, right? We have some exciting content planned for today. Just to kind of go over our goals. First, I'm going to talk about a professional development initiative that we ran through the Office of Adult Education in Philadelphia for about 2 years, which ended in December 2019. Given that it was all about using our curiosity and coming together as a community to explore technology, it seems especially relevant now. Who knew, right? But here we are. So I'm going to talk all about that initiative. I think that part may be relevant for administrators, but also, you know, if you're an adult education teacher and you're just looking to come together, maybe you have questions about using technology in your program, I think it would be relevant as well. I'm also going to talk about, of course, how this model could meet people where they are right now in the current crisis, and just some ideas for adapting this during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we're going to switch. You're going to get to hear from Jillian, who was one of our participants in this professional development initiative. She used Google Classroom during this 2-year professional development and has continued to use it now with her learners remotely. So I thought that would be kind of interesting for you guys to hear about. And last but not least, just have a chance to connect and share as a community. So let's see if I can move this along. I wanted to get started with something a little different, just a simple metaphor, kind of a theme for the day. Since the pandemic hit, a lot of us are using technology with adult learners in totally new ways. Maybe some of us were techies and we were really excited about this, and others are kind of like shaking our heads. Like, I was a great teacher using pen and paper. I mean, technology wasn't my thing. But either way, we're here right now, right? And I've been thinking a lot how using technology is kind of like swimming or surfing in the ocean. I know one day, hopefully we'll get back in that beautiful ocean on the beach, right? Beaches will be open again. So just bear with me for this metaphor. Sometimes using technology feels great. Feels like we're surfing like a pro. Maybe we learn how to successfully use a new program with our learners, and we had great class participation in our remote learning class. And everybody's responding enthusiastically. We just feel like we're doing great. Sometimes we get caught in the wave, right? Our Zoom call's a little bit glitchy. No learners came to that online class you spent like hours setting up. I know that's happens. And I think that just the bottom line here is that using technology means giving up some of our agency and some of our control, no matter how much skill or experience you have. And I think we need to kind of embrace and learn from that, rather than letting our frustration sometimes with technology kind of control us, letting the ocean control us, right? Trying to focus a little bit less on the outcome, focusing on our curiosities. Think about it sort of like building your soft skills, understanding when something's buggy and you can't control it, and maybe when it's user error, right? And not letting those emotions take over. Recognizing that there's usually a workaround, like calling somebody on the telephone, right? So just kind of our metaphor for the day, right? Okay. So moving on, we have our first, what I'm calling chat box challenge. So get ready. I'm going to ask you guys to write this in the chat box. I love this baseball metaphor in the chat. That's cool. Thank you, Wyman. So what is one word that describes your biggest challenge using technology right now? Just one word. Okay. Fear, access, overwhelming. Wow, these are coming in fast and furious. That's awesome. Maybe we can, awesome, that's very cool. Confusion, connectivity, ignorance, participation. We're just gonna let these come in for a minute and just see kind of where this goes. Wow, you guys have a lot to say in one word, right? This is amazing. I'm just loving all the, just everyone being able to participate and come together as a community. It's overwhelming to see all your comments, but it's really cool too. All right. Looks like we're slowing down just a little bit. Yeah, and please write that to all. Baby steps. I love the idea of taking some baby steps. I mean, that's like another good metaphor, right? You're probably, some of these things, I mean, we're all teachers and learners, right? Some of these things you're not going to learn in a day, even though we consider ourselves, a lot of us, proficient in technology. You can probably have an email and use the internet, a lot of us. It doesn't mean that it doesn't take a little bit of time. Frustration, decision fatigue, right? Yeah, definitely. We're all running, a lot of us are now running cyber schools. We didn't plan for that, right? Okay. Effectiveness. Failure. Wow. Yeah, not seeing people's reactions, that can be really hard. Not being able to have like that face-to-face interaction, particularly, you know, for a lot of us that are teaching ESL, you know, where there's language barriers. Definitely. Loneliness. Yeah, for sure. Okay, awesome. So just a lot of challenges. Looks like we're slowing down just a little bit, but it's kind of just amazing to see all of your kind of what everybody's going through, and just to realize that we're not alone, right? I'm going to ask you if you have one last thought to type it in, and we're going to switch. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a buffer because we're going to switch to our next question, okay? That's okay, Patrice. It's okay that it wasn't one word. Sometimes it's hard to get all of our emotions, everything that we're feeling right now, into just one word. I know it's hard. So speaking to a camera, right? Yep. Kind of feel like we're on CNN all the time, for better or worse. Trial and error. That's awesome. Very cool. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on. I'm going to ask you guys to stop answering this question, if that's okay. And we're going to go to our next question. Just really quickly, what's a success you've had using, just in one sentence or less? What's some kind of success that you've had using technology with your learners? Zoom, yeah. And you can use more than one word for this one if you want to, okay. One word's great too. Keeps it short and sweet. Learning new skills. A lot of you guys are mentioning particular platforms or programs like Facebook, Zoom, PowerPoint, Google Meet, and we'll be talking about, I know Jillian will be covering a little bit of that today. Google Slides. Wow, this is just really tremendous, you guys. It's great to see all these answers pouring in. Again, it's just overwhelming to see how many people are coming together. I was really bummed we were going to present this in April at COABE, and I was really upset, and we'd worked so hard. And it's just so great to be together in this community right now. It's just cool to see all of what you guys are coming up with. So, wow. Students who do attend love it. Yeah, so maybe for some of our learners, they are surprised by how much they enjoy remote learning. I know that barriers, cost of transportation, we're in a big city, right? And so it can be hard, you know, just getting to class, particularly for learners that are working all day or working at night and coming to class during the day. So maybe this is opening up like new avenues for you. Good attendance and participation. I'm also seeing the theme of meeting people where they are, which I definitely think is something that we need to think about both with our practitioners and with our learners in our classes, right? Yeah, okay, awesome. I'm gonna give you guys just another minute to kind of get it all out, and then I'm gonna continue. Yeah, so somebody is saying we're gonna have digital classes even when we return. For sure, I think this has been kind of an eye-opening experience, and they're saying, you know, maybe, you know, we still will be doing a lot in terms of working from home and working remotely, which is great for the environment and for transportation as well. So that's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that, Naomi. She's saying some previously withdrawn students have come out of their shell in a smaller group setting and in front of a screen. So yeah, I mean, there may be some learners that are more comfortable using the setting, and that's awesome. Very cool. Yeah, Christina, I'm with you. It's technology is the new normal. It's probably not going to go away. Awesome. Allie, yeah, we all care about the environment. I know a lot of wildlife have been coming out of the forest and the oceans during this time, and that's kind of a positive, right? Volunteer tutors, that's great. I know sometimes it takes work to manage volunteers, even though they give so much to so many of our programs, so that's great to see. Okay, I am unfortunately gonna have to move on. We have a lot planned for today, but I would say if you wanna keep your responses coming, if you guys, I'm gonna have to switch my focus back to the presentation, but if they're helpful, I think sometimes for you guys just to know you're not alone out there and to share your successes, please keep typing them in. Okay. So I am going to move on to talking about kind of the first objective, this professional development initiative, which we call the PHL Adult Education and Technology Initiative. We never did come up with a cool acronym, but that's okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about the design. I'm going to talk about the core goals and values, and then finally kind of the research base. So I also wanted to say I'm giving you guys kind of a 10-minute overview of a 2-year initiative. So if you want to learn more, we have these wonderful technology resource toolkits that will be available. I am going to share them in the chat link at the end of the webinar, and they will also be emailed to you guys, I promise. We're also sharing our email, so if you don't get them, you can harass us. That is fine. Please keep it civil, but you can also email us if you don't get that link. So again, much more in those toolkits, just giving a mile-high overview. You're probably going to have some questions. Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. You guys are all joys, and it's just lovely to be together with our wonderful adult ed community today. So the model of this 2-year professional development initiative. First, in terms of recruitment, we recruited adult educator teachers and administrators. A lot of them were teaching in classes, like Jillian taught a class, but she also manages, she's kind of a one-woman show and manages her whole program. I know that's familiar to some of us, right? So again, teachers and administrators from different programs in the Philadelphia area. And there were 12 people that started, 12 participants, and we ended the 2 years with 9. So pretty good, right? Participants were recruited because they were interested in trying out new technologies in their classrooms or programs. Some of them were experienced, some of them were very new to using technologies, but all of them were curious about trying something new related to technology in their classroom or program. We tried to frame this from the beginning, not as just as I want to use Khan Academy, but based on some sort of problem or challenge that they were having. So for example, Jillian, and she'll talk more about this later, was interested in how to reach her students, many of whom were restaurant workers and could not come to face-to-face classes because of their busy schedules. So could she reach them outside of regular face-to-face classroom time using technology? So all of our participants were able to frame some sort of challenge or problem they were having like this before, and they would kind of write a written statement before we met together for the first time. So they'd already thought about what's the challenge that they want to address using technology instead of, again, I want to try Google Classroom. Well, okay, why? What challenge or what problem is that going to address for you? At our kickoff at the project launch, which was a half-day session, participants came together and self-selected into teams. Remember, we had 12 people, so teams of about 3 to 4 people based on a shared problem of practice. In other words, some sort of broad theme they were all interested in exploring. So using Jillian's example, her team was interested in using technology to address issues related to retention. So Jillian, as I mentioned, was having issues with her learners who are busy restaurant workers with their retention in face-to-face classes. So again, all of Jillian's team was interested in retention as sort of a problem of practice. And the other teams included themes, very broad themes, like using technology to engage learners outside of the classroom was another of our themes. Then to narrow this very broad theme, so retention as an example can mean so many different things to different people in adult ed when you really get down to it. So they created kind of research question for their team, defining, for example, Jillian's team. That question kind of broke down what they meant by retention and what they were curious about. They then wrote individual research questions, kind of frames around a technology tool or resource. So for example, Jillian's question centered around how Google Classroom might be able to increase retention for learners in her program. Other folks focused on Khan Academy, text messaging, online reading software. So we had no restrictions around what kind of technology they could use. They really kind of chose, and it was framed around the problem or the challenge they were having. Finally, kind of getting into the heart of the project, We structured this around 3 90-day sprints, we called them, where teams met to experiment with, the individuals are experimenting and using technology for each of these 90-day sprints, whatever technology they chose. And then the small groups would meet regularly about once a month to talk about the problems that they were having and to collaboratively brainstorm. They also collected data to answer or to address their research question, and they wrote a written and a discussed like kind of a verbal reflection. So collecting some data, whether that was like a learner interview or a classroom journal or a pre and post test, a kind of range, was a big part of this, as was reflection. So I'm gonna move on. And if you have lots of questions, that's great. You can email me or you can read all about it in our tech resource toolkit. Core goals and values. So first, innovation. So kind of letting go of our fear of failure. Like I said before, using technology means kind of giving up our agency, giving up control. And especially given that so many of us are mid-career professionals, the stakes are higher, right? We're used to being in control. We're used to managing a classroom of adult learners, so many of us. So saying it's okay to fail was kind of a big deal for people. Inquiry, so a focus on curiosity in addition to the end goal. So if you want to use Khan Academy to increase students' scores in your GED science class, that's great. One of our participants did, but we also just want to make sure that you're interested in the process, that you have time to sit back and say and reflect on like, not only did it increase student scores, but how or why? And what is it about your teaching practices or the tool that may have contributed? And finally, collaboration, kind of just to create a supportive space where we can learn in community together. Okay, just a little bit on the research base. For many of you, the idea of a community of practice and the idea of practitioner inquiry should be fairly familiar. These are not new concepts. They date back to the 70s and 80s and even before that, right? Communities of practice, Wenger and LaVey, focus on building professional relationships through ongoing structured interactions. So in our case, these team meetings. Exploring problems of practice collaboratively. So coming together to problem solve in a group, in community, through these individuals. And I think the relationship building over time is a really important part of that, right? And then sharing knowledge across different levels of practitioner expertise. I think communities of practice is supposed to be about kind of experts sharing with novices learning from experts. But I think what we saw is that everyone is an expert and a novice in different moments, right? It kind of depends. So thinking about that, practitioner inquiry, kind of disrupting this hierarchy between formal research is generated by universities and informal knowledge is generated by teachers. So how often do we hear that a quote best practice is something that as a teacher we can take back and implement, right? So kind of getting away from just thinking of teachers as the implementers of research or best practices, and maybe thinking about teachers that as folks that have a very unique perspective. And I would include anybody working in a program, whether that's an administrator or coordinator in this too, right? That they have knowledge to share, and that through careful research process, they can also maybe test or build theories. And again, as I mentioned before, not just sharing the outcome, thinking about did your learner scores improve, but also thinking about the process, about being curious about the how and the why. All right. Moving on, just some final thoughts before we're going to jump into our first Q&A after this. So get ready with questions. So again, we are all technology teachers and learners, right? And I love this idea, this metaphor of lifelong learning and adult education. I think that's so important. Being a technology user sometimes means giving up control. Embrace that. You know, that's just part of what life is right now, and that's okay. Don't let your emotions take control, and try to keep a curious mind through all of this. One less formal approach that we've tried since COVID at Office of Adult Education is learning circles. So these were informal groups led by somebody who has been using either Zoom or Khan Academy Classroom or another Google Classroom, something like that for a while. Just very informally, they'll meet for an hour with anyone who's interested over Zoom. Maybe they'll give a mini homework assignment like create a classroom in Khan Academy and share what that was like for you and come back and discuss. So they're just, you know, month-long little mini informal chats around specific technology tools like Zoom that a lot of us are thrown into using. And a lot of it is just around a how to, because a lot of us are just trying to figure that out right now, and that's okay. A safe space to fail. I think something that folks from the project said is that trying technology is really emotional, especially as so many of us are like, think of ourselves as experts, as mid-career professionals, competent teachers and administrators. So we're not used to failing. And when we jump into something new like technology, it can be scary. So just structuring any PD so that people have a safe space to learn through their challenges. Last, building community is just as important as sharing strategies and how-tos, I believe. So this community we're building today on this webinar, community that we build at the COABE conference and in other places, regional conferences, in your own program, I think is just so important. It's just as much figuring out how things work and the outcome of it for your learners as having a sounding board and just knowing that you're not alone, right? That was a huge part of this project, just knowing that if one person tried text messaging with our learners and no one responded, knowing that it wasn't about their abilities, that they weren't a bad teacher, it just maybe had something to do with how they were using it. Maybe they needed a better incentive or something like that. So just coming together and knowing that a lot of our challenges are shared. All right, so we're gonna have two Q&A, right? So first one, obviously covering everything that I've talked about, and then the next one will be for Jillian. So if you guys have questions, let's see. For some reason I'm having some issues sharing the Q&A. What I might do, you guys, is just stop sharing my PowerPoint since this is the last slide anyway. And I think the prompt is obviously any questions that you had so far. So I'm gonna stop sharing my, my screen so I can see the your questions, okay? All right. Just bear with me. All right, great. So now I can see is this a sales pitch? No, this was all free. We got a grant. I wish we had something to sell, you guys, but it's just selling the idea of curiosity and inquiry. How have the study circles worked? How has it helped build technology skills? I think that's a good question. I think it just helps people build a little bit of confidence. So for somebody that's like never used Zoom before and is now thrust into leading a class with it, having a space with like maybe 4 or 5 other practitioners to really go through like the ins and outs for an hour and just really try it with someone who's maybe a little more knowledgeable, I think has been really good. What advice or ways do you have to help provide a safe space to try? I think just like constantly reinforcing that. Ours was a PD initiative, so I was facilitating this, you know, and so I constantly was just like reiterating the idea of a safe space, that it's okay to fail. And I think just like having that as a mantra can be really powerful. And also building relationships over time. Obviously, it's a little more nerve-wracking to share you know, in a webinar like this with hundreds of people, or for a one-off webinar with folks you've never met before, even if that is in person, but having like those ongoing communities of practice, I think can really help. Were any incorrections like no, we actually do have a pretty strong partnership with the Philly Department of Prisons, and they do work with adult learners, but no, but that would be amazing. What were some other problems teachers thought could be solved by technology? Thank you, Lisa. So they were very broad. So some of them had to do with engaging learners outside of the classroom. So one of our practitioners tried text messages. He was working with low-level ESL students, and so he thought not only to help get them digitally engaged, but help them practice like reading and writing and responding. So he would send them like short vocabulary questions. Oftentimes, to be honest, they would respond with just like I'm coming to class today and ignore his question about like, is the shirt green or red? But that's okay. I mean, he learned a lot about authentic engagement, I think, through text. Some of the others were Google Classroom, Khan Academy. They're all in the toolkit, by the way. Some online reading software. One person just used iPads as a way to engage students. Okay. Paul, how can our field ensure that leaders support this collaborative approach to PD? I mean, I think it's just about like trying to reinforce this from the top, right? We had a funder that was very interested and helped provide us very small stipend to participants to buy technology equipment. But I think it's just like about understanding that that PD can be more than like a how-to. The how-tos are really important, right? That's kind of what we need right now in this moment. But understanding that there is a research base and a need for longer term PD, and that can often lead to longer term success in our practice. Okay, I'm going to probably stop answering some of your wonderful, wonderful questions because I really want Jillian to get a chance to present, and I'm a little bit over, but I commit to we're going to give you guys our emails after this, and we're going to hopefully be able to also get back to some of you like over email and stuff after this webinar. So I am going to stop and I'm going to turn it back to our host.
Great, and so we're ready for Jillian. Please go ahead and share your slides. Jillian, for some reason we can't hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Hello, everyone. Let's see. Okay. Oops. It looks like I'm not able to share my screen.
Okay, let's try this again. Okay, do you want to try it again?
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Okay, wonderful. Can everyone see my screen?
We can, thank you.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Jen said, my name is Jillian, and I'm also joining you from Philadelphia. And I'm going to share my experience as a participant in Jen's fantastic project with the Philadelphia Adult Education and Technology Initiative. Before I tell you about my research, I think it would be helpful to know a little bit about where I teach. I work with a nonprofit, the Garces Foundation, where I'm in charge of an ESL program. It's called English for the Restaurant and Everyday Living. We offer classes year-round, and all of these classes are taught by volunteer teachers. We typically have about 100 learners enrolled each quarter, and our learners are hoping to improve their English language skills so that they can earn promotions at work in the restaurant, better support their kids in school, gain confidence to perhaps pursue a GED, and then of course just to better connect with their neighbors. My team members and I focused on the issue of learner retention. We believed that the effective use of digital communication tools may be one way to address problems of learner retention and to help more individuals to remain engaged in our programs long enough to see positive outcomes and achieve educational goals. As I mentioned, I teach folks who work in the restaurant industry. And so at the beginning of each quarter, there are roughly 100 students enrolled, but by the end of the quarter, there are sometimes only 50 to 60 students regularly attending these classes and meeting requirements to complete the course. The most commonly reported reason for dropping out is irregular and demanding work schedules in the restaurants. So my group helped me arrive at the idea of offering hybrid courses, which means that we would meet both in person and online. This could potentially meet the scheduling needs of more learners and therefore improve retention. Why? Because students would only be required to attend class in person once a week rather than twice and study at their convenience with online assignments. We decided to use Google Classroom for the online coursework component and to pilot the hybrid with our advanced book club. These learners would meet just once a week to discuss the reading assignments and use Classroom for keeping students engaged with their reading, with quizzes and discussion questions. All of the students in the book club used the mobile Classroom application, which means that they were completing all of these assignments on their phones. So to measure the effectiveness of Classroom, I analyzed assignment completion rates, and I conducted interviews to get a sense of what motivated or even discouraged our learners when using Google Classroom. And from this information, there are 4 significant lessons that I'd like to share with you. First, learners reported feeling more motivated to participate in classroom discussion if other students regularly responded to what they had to say. This might seem obvious, but I think it's important to remember that one learner's response to another learner's idea is what happens in our physical classrooms, and it seems that we have to replicate that when we move learning online. Second, learners are more likely to complete assignments with multiple choice rather than short or long answer discussion questions. Each week with the book club, learners were assigned a multiple choice quiz and an open-ended response to a posted question. The third takeaway was that less than half of learners in this book club were regularly completing classroom assignments. And what I mean by regular completion is that they completed all but 3 assignments. And then finally, I observed that if a learner was absent from our in-person class meetings, that he or she would also be absent from discussion and assignments on Classroom that week. So for me, that was an important takeaway because it called my attention to the need to help my students understand how to make the most of an online learning platform and to see it as the means to remaining engaged in their coursework when you have to be absent from the physical space. And then enter COVID-19. And all of a sudden, I had 2 weeks to develop and implement a plan for online classes. This meant that I had to choose a course format, select a platform, create instructional materials, and then prepare our students and teachers for their first day of class. As all of you, I know you're experiencing something similar. Needless to say, I felt overwhelmed with this task, with so many uncertainties and so little information on how to remotely do all of these things. Excuse me, I'm sorry, seems like my screen is frozen. Sorry, everyone, please bear with me. Okay, there we go. And so with so many uncertainties and so little information on how to remotely do all of these things during a pandemic, especially, I found a lot of comfort in returning to those 4 lessons because to me, those were the certainties, information that I had gathered myself that I could use to inform what our future online classes would look like. So how did my research help inform the response? I knew that our approach had to be straightforward. It had to be as simple as a multiple choice quiz if we expected our learners to participate. I knew that our learners needed an interactive solution with immediate gratification in communicating with their classmates and teachers. I especially knew that we needed a solution that felt familiar, maintaining as much as possible of what learners are already accustomed to with in-person and face-to-face classes. So in considering Google Classroom and given all the experience I had with building this online learning community with Google Classroom as the digital tool for our book club, it seemed like the obvious choice, a perfect conclusion to my research project, except that it wasn't the right choice, at least not yet. I realized this when I started to consider the extent of what needed to be accomplished with each student in a remote tech support situation to prepare them for the first day of class. First, you would need to download the application. I would text a link, easy enough. But then this is where it could get complicated. Many of my students don't have a Google account and would need help with creating one. We would also need to help students safely store their login information, create secure passwords, and as many of you can relate to, this can be a highly frustrating process for our learners. But once learners are successfully signed into Classroom, they would also need to join the class using a code. And then once you're finished with all of those things, then you can get to the fun stuff with basic navigation tutorials on completing assignments, how to turn them in, understanding the different components of Classroom. And I knew that this would be too much all at once, and that I would lose many of our learners in this process. So my solution, I call it solution 1.0. As of April 5th, have been operating online with this package. Part of this package is WhatsApp. It's familiar to our students as they already use it nearly every day to communicate with family and friends outside of the US. We were already using group messages regularly for each class to communicate with each other, and so that I could send reminders, communicate in Spanish, which is our students' native language. And Zoom is, it's not a familiar tool for our learners, but it was the best tool to maintain regular in-person virtual class meetings. It's also the most straightforward option because you don't need to create an account. We kept it simple and sent the download URL for Zoom over WhatsApp. And then once the application is installed on learners' phones, teachers message the Zoom link and students just have to click on the link and it automatically opens. The key in this is that learners can still interact in person with one another and with their teachers. And I'm still using Google Classroom, but I'm keeping that for my teachers. It's a great way to network everyone, to access curriculum, contribute original curriculum materials that you've created on your own. And it's a great place to have discussion, post questions, and see everyone's response to how they might handle a situation. And I think that the overarching goal that I've come to realize through all of this is that I want to encourage a culture of learning that's open to change and exploration. And I know that I will scaffold learners towards that goal by designing straightforward lessons using familiar digital tools. My students regularly remind me poco a poco, or little by little is key. And so I think that it's awfully important for our students to develop the skills to learn online. And I also think that Classroom can be an effective tool in preparing my learners for doing that. However, before we jump into that, we'll need to use our current solution to develop some essential skills. For instance, before our online classes, our learners were not familiar with using forms, and it was not the reliable way for me to collect information because so many of our learners would not hit that submit button, and that information would be lost. So with online classes, we've been sending forms over WhatsApp for students to complete as homework, check-ins at the beginning of class, as a quiz, and our students have mastered that skill. So that's one important step towards being able to use a platform like Classroom without it being too overwhelming all at once. We're also sending links to Google Docs over WhatsApp so that students can get familiar with writing together on a shared document. We practice discussion on WhatsApp with nested replies, much in the same way that you see formatted on Classroom with the question assignment. And finally, we will eventually start creating Google accounts for our students, exploring email, using it as a way to communicate, and we'll even start exploring other tools such as Meet and other video call applications so that students realize that they're becoming pretty tech savvy and that it's time to try other things, and they will start feeling less afraid to explore the things that they're interested in learning about online and really develop their skills to pursue their interests. So at this point, we will open everything up to further discussion. What questions do you have for me? And what is your biggest takeaway after hearing about our experiences?
Wonderful. Can you see the Q&A there, Jillian?
I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
Actually, Jen, would you be able to read that and then I can respond?
Totally. And here's a great question for you, Jillian. How do you introduce Google Classroom to your ESL students? Do you also use it for the lower level students?
That's a great question. So with my advanced students, it was an easier process. There were fewer steps involved, the ones that I mentioned earlier, because all of them had Google accounts already. They were already familiar with using some of those things like email, Google Docs, filling out forms. And so the introduction was more about diving in and beginning to use it. Whereas with the lower level ESL learners, all of those things that I described those things would need to happen in order for us to start using it, which is why I decided not to use it as our solution for online classes.
Awesome. Thank you, Jillian. So one question, I'm curious why you prefer Zoom to Google Meet. They do many of the same things with access by link. So yeah, maybe just talk a little bit about why Zoom over some of the other platforms out there.
Sure. So like I said, we started our classes on April 5th, excuse me. And at that point, I had tested using Google Hangouts. Unfortunately, at that point, Meet was only available with G Suite, and it recently became available to everyone. And so limited to Google Hangouts at that point, you have a limit to how many users you can have on a video call. And again, you would have to have a Google account and be signed into that to use it. I chose Zoom because our students would not have to do anything other than download that application to their phone. You send the link and there it is.
Awesome. And Jillian, I know Zoom sometimes limits the amount of time for a free account. Was there a way that you were able to get around that?
That's a great question, Jen. I work for a nonprofit, and so I am not technically a public school or a K-12 institution, but Zoom does have a form that you can fill out to request access or free use of the waived time limit, and I filled it out and they approved me, and so we do not have any time limits.
Thank you, Jillian. That's a great tip for everyone out there.
Yes.
Maybe a couple more questions. We'll go to about 2:57, and then I know there's some stuff to kind of wrap up at the end. One person wanted to know what's a typical assignment you would use in WhatsApp. So maybe just a little more detail about like how you would use WhatsApp with your learners.
Sure. So in terms of assignments, it really depends on a lot of different things. But the most recent assignment that I created in one of my classes was very simple to test students' ability to recall irregular past tense verbs. And so it was a simple multiple choice quiz, essentially. You can have multiple choice questions. I also had short answer responses, something very basic. And you can include videos within the forms, so students can watch a video and then write a response to that. You can have, you could insert, for instance, a song from YouTube and ask students to write the words that they're hearing that they recognize. You can embed a photo, ask students to describe what they see in the photo. There are a lot of different ways to have students interact with content using forms.
Awesome. So I see we're kind of out of time. This is a technical question, but 3 people have asked, where do you go to get the free Zoom? So any tips or tricks, Jillian, before we wrap it up?
Yes, I think, honestly, I believe that it was in my settings. There was a link right underneath something about the time limit. And this was way back at the end of March. I don't know if it's still there, but perhaps that can be one of the links that we share with everyone tomorrow.
Awesome. And Jillian, do you want to quickly share that last slide with our email addresses, just real briefly?
Absolutely.
And I think we can turn it back over to Sharon with that.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you participating in this as our presenters. You guys have done a fantastic job. And what we will do is we will ensure that we get the questions together. We'll send them over to the presenters. They've already been gracious and said that they'll have these back to us so we can get them out to you. So there's 50 questions that are sitting there open. Just know that we are going to get back to you all and that we will respond to your questions. And now I want to take a minute to turn this over to Dr. Sarah Wilkins to say a few words. And we're also going to have a poll at the end. So Dr. Sarah.
Hi, thank you. I want to thank you again so much for allowing a KET to be a part of this really impactful and informational session today. I've watched every minute of it. I've gotten so much out of it myself, so I'm delighted that we were able to be a participant in this. I saw that some of you all maybe didn't get the link the first time to some of the resources that I was talking about, so I'll just post that now. I think that just went. And also, if you had any questions, I just wanted to let you know my email address. Some of you did ask if these resources are free in PBS Learning Media. Indeed, they are. And you can explore more all about that when you visit the link. So again, thank you for letting KET be a part of this experience today, and I hope everyone stays well.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. We appreciate the sponsorship by KET. Thank you again, Jillian, and thank you again, Jennifer. We truly appreciate the wonderful job that you did, and thank you to all of our participants. We appreciate you joining us today. So if you haven't taken a minute, please fill out the short little poll that's up there, and we will see you all in our next webinar, which is on Wednesday. There are 1,800 people registered, so if you are registered, please come early so you can have a seat. Thank you, everybody. Bye now.